God's Legion by J.T. Dowdy. Prologue. A goddess sat at a table alone in a rustic room half filled with smoke from several burning hearths to ward off the chill damp air. On the table before her sat 2 glasses filled with an off-colored brown liquid which gave off the faint aroma of ammonia and fruits. No sounds were heard in the room, besides the crackling of green logs on the fires, as all of the tap-room's patrons had been forced out into the rain until the woman's meeting had been concluded. The woman's left hand was holding up her head as if she was tired, while her right hand passed a large gold coin between her fingers, with the practiced ease of a lifetime of endless boredom. Despite the weather, the woman wore a low-cut emerald green dress of the finest quality silk, and her pristine white leather boots remained free of mud thanks to a palanquin carried by her minotaur retainers outside. Ice-blue eyes rimmed with scarlet stared at the tavern's front door as her shock white hair jutted out against the nape of her neck in the humid, stuffy air. Moving her free hand slightly, the white-haired woman played with electromagnetic fields to unlock the door for her guest to step in out of the rain. Taking one dismissing look around the empty dining room, the newcomer sniffed disdainfully to no one in particular, before proceeding to the open seat across from the woman casually running the coin across her knuckles. The newcomer sat down and pushed back the hood of her brown traveler's cloak to stare at the half-full glass in front of her. Slowly, she raised it to her nose and then set it back down as her senses were assaulted by what passed for the tavern's best. The newcomer was shorter than average for a creator, at a hair over 9 foot, and her skin was stretched taut across her bones as if she had been missing meals her physical vessel did not require. Her deep brown eyes were hard as agates and lacked anything resembling humor or compassion. When she spoke, her voice was full-bodied. "We are not pleased by your failure to adhere to the agreed-upon plan, Gaia. Pray tell, just what made you think it was a wise decision to attack Lucifer openly and in such an obvious way as to show your ignorance?" Creator Gaia continued to transfer the coin between her fingers as she leaned back in her wooden chair to glare at the other creator across from her. "It is the middle of the night here on Olympus Ahura, and you force me to come out in the rain and endure rude accusations against my person. I have a million better things to do than sit here and be lectured by you." Gaia stopped talking as the rode, weary-looking woman produced a medium-sized sack from underneath her cloak and placed it on the table with an exaggerated gesture. "What is that?" Ahura Mazda said nothing, but gestured for the sack to be opened with a painfully slender finger. The coin vanished from the white-haired woman's grasp as she reached out her hands to undo the small length of leather cord which held the sack closed. The moment Gaia disturbed the sack, the smell of death wafted to assault her, greater than mortal senses. The rough fabric slid down its contents to reveal the pained face of someone the Creator knew. "Why have you done this?" Gaia asked. "Because, sister, you let your lackey leave a trail which points right back to you, and by extension, us. Really, could you not find some third party of unknown mercenaries to attack him? Why use such a well-known angel like our dear departed Fenris here?" Gaia reached out to turn the head to where it was not looking accusingly at her. "I merely ordered a test run to familiarize my people with technology we do not normally use in the Enclave. Besides, my orders were explicitly to avoid Legion targets at all costs and focus on the host ascendancy. Given their terrible relations, no Legionnaire worth his salt would ever bother to help Elohim's pet mortals." "Why do you think that?" "Because," Gaia said with a laughing snort, Everyone knows the Legion is far too busy with expansion to care about what happens outside of their own borders, much less host-controlled territory. You have been too long in Jehovah's dimension to know this. But Elohim and Lucifer have been at each other's throats for hundreds of millions of years. If you believe the rumors, even longer. Elohim has even gone so far to organize his religion to teach his pet mortals to hate the Legion. A smug smile crossed her face as she added, "Those fools even call Lucifer the great evil in their prayers." So you tell me, sister, why would our foe care about the loss of a single host ship again? Ahura Mazda waited for Gaia to take a drink before she said, "Because the vessel Fenris was going to use to lure one of Elohim's into the trap was intercepted by a Legion mobile shipyard. We rather doubt you need to be reminded how many mortals crew such a vessel as to take up a diameter of 50 miles, and because you fell for the favored game of our enemy. Did you bother to investigate the source of their supposed hatred? Of course you did not. But even if you had, you would have found a lie long in the making. Those two are old friends. Even to this day." Gaia paused and took the glass from her lips. "You're mistaken. Every child in that universe knows the hatred the two nations have for each other." Ahura's chin touched her rested hand as she let out a heavy sigh. Nations, yes, but only because of ideological differences held by those in power, and because Elohim's angels are the most selfish of the lot. "Gods," she complained, "we have saddled ourselves with the ignorant again, if you cannot see what has been clearly in front of your face this whole time." Gaia slapped the head of her dead employee across the room. "You dare! Remember, Ahura, it was I who gave you the resources and men you needed when you were down on your luck. Do not insult me on my own world." Gaia suddenly found herself being picked up out of her chair to be slammed into the stone wall behind her, with a vice-like hand around her throat and the point of a dagger pressed ever so slightly against her left eyeball. She had never seen Ahura move a muscle, and yet the woman had moved around a table to snatch a being who could make her own universe from her chair in an instant. Ahura's calm and level voice had changed to be something almost bestial, and there was a wild look to her eyes which looked to be excited by the prospect of immediate violence. "You will hush now, child, or I will carve out your tongue and roast it over that fire over there. I like tongue. It has a springy texture to it which makes me happy, sort of like cardiac muscle." With a shudder of jerky movements, Ahura rolled her head around, as if loosening sore muscles while making pained noises. With an animal snarl, she sheathed her dagger and let go of her younger sibling. "We are disappointed in you, sister," Ahura said, pulling the hood of her cloak up and moving to leave the establishment. "You really ought to leave your own universe once in a while to see things for yourself. According to my spy within his house staff, he has become involved regardless of your intentions or orders. And if we can follow the trail back to you, well, you can bet he will as well. You had better hurry and come up with some convincing lie while fabricating evidence as to where Fenris has gone off to. Like it or not, the Legion will be calling on you. Your nation of ignorant, brainwashed savages will do what to stop them. Throw rocks at starships while they glass world after world from the safety of orbit. The both of us know exactly how that particular argument will play out." Gaia was still dumbstruck from her utter domination as she moved slowly back to her table. Her voice was unsteady as she asked, "But why would—" Ahura stopped with one hand on the door handle. "Because, child, your ploy ended up affecting his people instead. Were you not paying attention to what we said? He just lost a shipyard. That is over 120,000 of the mayflies. He cares for them to an unhealthy degree, and we have it on the best authority he is rather put out." "Then let him be put out," Gaia spat. "The Enclave will handle him if he comes looking for a fight." "You forget, Ahura, I still have access to the same technologies as the rest of you. Just because I choose to not use them does not mean my Enclave is incapable of doing so." The solid steel doorknob squealed under the crushing grip of the departing creator. "You misunderstand. Just like almost all of our kind," Ahura said. "For the entirety of Elohim's current universe, our foe has been known by the name Lucifer. Which is odd, because did you know Lucifer was the name of Jehovah's first-made angel? We knew the Legion Master when he went by the name Malek Taus. This was before Horus and Set supposedly murdered the creator who went by that same name. We both know the cardinal rule of our kind, that only a being of spirit can kill another of its own kind. Yes. The Legion Master should have been permanently erased, as his spirit should have been absorbed by the two who killed him. Yet he is still alive. Oh, sure, he looks slightly different, and puts on a good act. But we know it is really him. His eyes and subtle mannerisms give the charade away." Ahura Mazda shook her head side to side as she let out a long sigh before continuing. "Can we both agree that the one we know as Lucifer is in fact not, since he is obviously a creator and not something so mundane as an angel? Then again, he cannot be one of us, since he still lives. Those of our older siblings in the higher dimensions are absolutely frightened when we ask for more information on the Legion Master. Even Jehovah grows pale and refuses to talk about him at any meaningful length. We do not know much, but we are starting to believe our hated enemy is something far older and far more dangerous than the likes of us. Something so powerful to make even that old bastard Izanagi fearful." Gaia finished both her drink and the untouched one meant for her guest before moving towards the exit door. "I do not know if I can believe such a thing, Ahura. Lucifer is the same kind of being as the rest of us. Come now, we can create our own universes thanks to our abundance of spirit, and yet here you are, claiming ones such as us, cannot distinguish another of our own kind. After all, what can be mightier than us gods? Your paranoia is starting to get the better of you." The door chime jingled as Ahura opened the door into the driving rain. "We rather doubt it. Those few older siblings who would talk to us on the matter claim the Legion has always existed for as long as they can remember, and that the one who runs it has always acted in the same manner, though he may change in appearance. Mind you, these are beings whose own age makes us look like mayfly children." The mad creator shook her head side to side while hiding a look of true fear. "God's sister, the old ones like Izanagi, could crush us with their little finger, as if we were no more than a poorly written essay of thought. What could make monsters like them cow and fall silent?" Chapter 1. My mother, the creator Lamashtu, used to tell me stories of her older siblings who ruled empires which dwarfed my people's own by several orders of magnitude. She would often tell me of the politics of Elohim's host ascendancy, as well as Odin's Aesir, because she was good friends with the two of them. Sometimes she would even attempt to explain Amun-Ra's empire, or Vishnu's Brahmanavata. Though truth be told, listening to those explanations always put me to sleep, as both of those factions were one-dimensional in the extreme. One faction she would almost never speak of was the Legion. I spent what felt like years in the libraries in the capital, combing them for information on the subject. I even went to other nations' collegiate entities to find answers. It should not surprise you to learn my attempts ultimately proved inconclusive, and that I was left with more questions than answers. The Legion existed. This much was widely known, yet no one on the outside of it was exactly sure what purpose or design it served. I now know why my mother was wholly terrified of her older brother who controlled it, given my current intimate living arrangements with its leader. You could say with confidence that it was a wise decision for the Legion Master to choose anonymity and misinformation instead of the truth. The Legion exists to pacify the unknown portions of the created universes so that those of us in the known have room to expand. More importantly, it keeps the current universal superpowers from waging constant warfare over border territory, with weapons so incomprehensibly destructive they would appear as magic. It is far better to have the eyes of this military and economic juggernaut facing outwards rather than inwards to the dysfunction of societies ruled by stagnant beings, in some cases older than this current universe. Excerpt from What is the Legion? By Princess Delia Mont-Senior. The barking shouts of orders, intermixed with curses, could be heard echoing across the main hangar deck of the Legion battleship Morana. Her angelic and mortal crew hurried to take their battle stations with the practiced ease of drills. The crew had just received a distress call from the mobile shipyard Grendelane in the middle of their graveyard shift, and were wholly unprepared to take such a dangerous recovery job, given where the shipyard mysteriously found itself. Yet, despite the risk, the Legion Master ordered his people into the unknown, out of concern for those in distress. Besides, if the ancient being and 100 of his best and most capable angels were incapable of handling a problem, then it was time to retire into the pages of history. At the end of Grendelina's distress call came the reason for the extra worry and angst from Morana's crew: the ship's location. The shipyard was located deep in the middle of what some sentient life called the Booter's Void, a stellar anomaly where the gravity of the surrounding universe has left a massive blank hole of space measuring some hundreds of millions of empty and lonely cubic light-years of space. Only a handful of rogue stars and their associated planets were found in this void, all of them without intelligent life, all of them without higher, complex life of any kind due to what roamed and hunted in the inky blackness between the stars, especially in desolate places such as the Booter's Void. Feral angelic beings known as demons. Demons were angels who had either lost their purpose in life or had been driven insane by the longevity of their immortal existence. Mortals could destroy their physical vessels, but a being of spirit would always be able to make a new body given enough time. And time was something such individuals had in near infinite abundance. While faster-than-light travel by warping space was a common enough in-system propulsion method, most sane mortals chose the guaranteed safe route of interstellar travel through the vast network of quantum displacement gates operated by the host ascendancy for reasonable enough prices. Too many ships disappeared when venturing out into the black, and mortals being mortals tended to favor the demons lurking in the darkness as the culprits rather than mechanical failures. More often than not, what few survivors of such piratical encounters tended to corroborate such fears. And besides, only a mad fool did not understand that demons would risk life and limb for a morsel of food. The issue being the only food which would sustain them was a sentient soul, and to consume a soul, they generally just ate mortals alive. For many of the mortals on the ancient ship, this was going to be their first time being in such a desolate part of known creation. For others, especially the older angels, they grabbed every weapon which wasn't nailed down in preparation for what they knew was going to be a long day, filled with many life-or-death moments. Demons and angels required a physical body to interact with the material universe, as they were not creators who could forge a new universe into reality through the brute force application of their will. A physical body meant there were certain requirements which needed to be met, such as the presence of an atmosphere and heat. Since legionnaires always wore their environmentally sealed amoeba-powered armor, their best tactic for fighting demons in a starship or space-based installation was to vent the atmosphere. However, since the quantum comms connection with Grendoline had been cut, no one knew what state the shipyard was likely to be in. Those sailors old enough to have seen a demonic ship with their own eyes claimed one of two sightings. The first was a cobbled-together amalgamation of rust and prayer, while the others were of modern and currently in use designs. Those brave scholars who never left their comfortable offices and chairs loved to argue ineffectual theories as to why such a seemingly large disparity in technology existed, and many a holodrama was made to play on the uncertainty. Morana, the same individual who the ship was named after, found nothing with her sensors for many light minutes in any direction other than the broken remains of a Legion shipyard. Yet she was too jaded to believe there could not have been something lurking and waiting to pounce when her attention was focused elsewhere. She ordered a full fighter sweep of the area, along with firing thousands of small quantum relay probes to give a real-time image of the area for a light hour. In the main hangar of the battleship, 10 Gremlin gunships hovered lightly over the deck, thanks to their powerful agrav drives, which kicked up shimmering heat washers. Normal use saw them flying through the void inside of a space-time warping bubble. However, such use of a warp pocket inside of a ship caused horrifically deadly problems for both gunship and home. The gunships looked like white elongated cylinders with sections missing while their side doors were open. Any atmospheric wings and weapons systems would be extruded via nanites in the event they were needed. While any shape could fly in the void, the craft were made predominantly for atmospheric flight, and having explosives hanging onto stubby wings during re-entry made for a one-way ride no one was likely to forget any time soon. 80 power-armored angelic legionnaires were boarding the hovering gunships with looks of grim fatalism, along with the 20 of their number who wore larger specialized armor for various tasks. Their armor was a mixture of organic technology and nanite construction. Hydraulic amplification was provided by a large vat-grown amoeba via a mantle interface. The rest of the armor was laser and heat-resistant graphene, bonded to a layered latticework of nanites and iridium. Thanks to the Legion's unprecedented use of the imperceptible machines, all of its soldiers and sailors were outfitted with strength-enhancing armor. Most stellar and galactic-spanning empires which had sense chose not to use nanomachines because the Legion's superior technology could hack into any computer system and turn said technology against its owners. Most nations were forced to forgo powered armor as it was logistically impractical to maintain over interstellar distances without the use of nanomachines. Supply lines which stretched across galaxies or farther were not sustainable. The Legion did not need supply lines, as their ships could quantum teleport, or displace to the laymen, anywhere in creation. Other nations did not have the computing power to move so much mass through quantum tunnels and were then forced to use the displacement gates or kick their engines into cruising mode and stay bottled up for days, weeks, or months at FTL speeds. Though each individual suit of armor was considered unique to the wearers, there were general patterns and similarities between the generations. With the exception of a standard issue sidearm, the miniature nanite factories on the soldiers' backs would produce whatever they needed in the way of ammunition for individual and varied weapons from all over the known universes. The Legion Master was a staunch proponent of allowing his soldiers to use the weapons they were most comfortable with, and given the legion's vast, unimaginable size, there were many differences in the culturally preferred weapons of the legionnaires. While most of the newer mortal soldiers had multicolored paint schemes denoting their individual 10-man contuberniums and several thousand-man legios, all wore what were called honor chains. In the legion, one was not given a medal for surviving a battle or campaign with honors. Instead, one was allowed to add another link to the chains attached to their armor. Each slender, jewelry-sized link was inscribed with the name and location of a battle fort. Some of the older mortals had their pauldrons covered, or wore baldricks, like certain holodrama warriors of note. The immortal angels looked to be wearing mail armor underneath their load-bearing gear. Each helmet was decorated and shaped to the preference of the individual wearer. Some wore their own faces, some with grotesque caricatures of themselves, while others wore death masks of snarling visages to clash against those who preferred blank features. For every 8 standard legionnaires, there were 2 specialists. Since all were trained as basic medical personnel and maintenance was handled by nanomachines, the specialists generally wore the bulky Colossi support chassis. The Colossi carried a contubernium of 10 men's heavy weapons, what would generally be crew-served weapons in other armies. Their larger and more cumbersome armor was powered by specially grown amoebas, which were engineered to allow them to keep pace while carrying more weight. Though the organic component of the larger armor tended to wear out with greater frequency due to the greater strain. Walking towards the awaiting gremlins was the old creator Lucifer and the metal avatar of the sentient Morana. An onlooker would never know the being who now went by the name Lucifer controlled the lion's share of known territory in the universes by his manner of dress. His boots had not seen polish in what looked to be a century, and his pants were an unhealthy off-grey color from where they used to be stark black, along with his shirt. What was supposed to be a deep purple colonial-styled jacket had turned a shade of sun-bleached lavender, and every silver button and accent was tarnished to an almost unrecognizable state to stand out sharply against the almost supernatural sheen of his silver eyes. His long mane of brilliant silver hair was held back with a length of faded ribbon, which looked to be on the verge of giving up and surrendering to time. Morana used to be a university scientist, although this was back during the Second Creation, some unknowable time in the far distant past. The star orbiting their home world on the resource-poor edge of their galaxy was beginning to expand into its red giant phase. Temperatures had been rising steadily for several hundred years, and the inevitable prognosis was death if they remained trapped. Morana, her sister and cousin, and 2 of her brothers were the premier scientific minds of the doomed people. Together, they worked tirelessly to design sleeper ships to carry some of their people into the stars. Morana's greatest contribution was the development and implementation of consciousness transfer technology. The Dreamland, as she called it, were individual or communal digital paradises for her people to continue to live in while their bodies were stuck, frozen in cryogenic stasis. Her people were looking for a new world to begin again, yet what their massive single sleeper vessel found instead was a flotilla of Legion warships. Being a xenophobic race due to isolation, the sleeper ship opened fire on the unknown vessels only to be boarded by none other than the Legion Master himself. After a few minor firefights with the sleeper ship's automated internal defenses, Morana surrendered after coming to terms with this new unknown enemy to find the salvation of her people she had worked so long for. Unfortunately, it had taken so long to find anyone that Morana's home world had been sterilized of all life, and the only remaining members of her people were in the Dreamland. At least this is what their people claimed. Morana had fashioned her body after what she remembered of her long-dead original one. She was painfully skinny and short, with a pinched face and large, round, unblinking eyes. She had effectively survived off her people's equivalent of coffee and cigarettes when she had been leading her teams of scientists. She even recreated her smoke-scarred voice, though she could have become anything she wished. Her metal body was slim in bust and waist beneath nanite lab coat, and the impossibly thin strands of her hair billowed in the gunship's aggrave heat wash as if they were alive. She was not at all happy to be here in this inky darkness, and she did not hide her displeasure. The sentient wanted more ships to assist in the recovery, though she knew it would take time to gather them. Gwendoline was her biological cousin from back when her people were still flesh and blood, and since she had been in direct contact with her cousin, she knew what was waiting for them. Morana was forced to yell to be heard over the whine of the idling gunships. "This is stupidity, the likes of which I have seldom seen from you in all of the time we have been together, old man. And I cannot fathom why you are so eager to rush this. We both know every last one of my cousin's crew are either dead or wish they were. We are out here in the middle of absolute nowhere, with absolutely diddly jack, all nothing for backup or support." She stamped her foot on the deck plating for emphasis. "Did you forget? Though called a battleship because of you and my vanity, my body is only a destroyer with upgraded guns. What if we run into some hidden problem, huh? What if, oh, I don't know. This is a trap set for us because you are as predictable as entropy." Lucifer shook his head for what felt like the umpteenth time, though he was forced to admit the woman was right. The old being's reply was one of infuriating calm, a habit most found annoying. "You worry too much, old girl," he said. "Either a thing will be, or it will not. There is little point wasting time arguing the what-ifs." A powerful hand clamped onto the ancient being's arm to force him to stop. Slowly he turned and met the gaze of the furious metal woman. "Gods, you're being a stubborn ass today." Morana growled, her voice cold and dangerous. "I shouldn't have to remind you, Aemon and his burn can all be killed. Unlike you, the Legion Master often had a problem with rushing headlong into danger when he made his mind up to do a thing, heedless of the consequences for those following him. Being the oldest in creation, there was nothing known which could offer him sufficient challenge, a fact he almost forgot more than he cared to admit. Even though a handful of the angels in Century Zero were some of the oldest in the Legion, their ages were almost childlike when compared to his own. Lucifer reached out a hand to squeeze Morana's shoulder. "I'm sorry. I lost track of my head there for a moment." Morana smiled and said, "No charge. But if you would be open to some advice, let some poor legate handle the war against the first creation machines. You need a vacational, broody britches. You are starting to make mistakes like this more and more." "I'm not that bad yet, am I?" Morana's emotionless stare said it all. "Fine," Lucifer agreed, throwing up his hands in mock surrender to the unmovable mountain of will which was one of his oldest friends. "When I get back from your cousin, I'll put Belial or Mephistopheles on it, though I still can't take any more angels with me on this trip. Bringing Gwendoline back online will be an exercise in speed. Given we do not know how many demons will be waiting for us, I do not want to be tripping over people in the corridors when it is time to run." Morana closed her unblinking eyes and sighed as she knew what the ancient being meant. The sailors and soldiers who crewed the massive vessel were dead, and the Legion Master could not bring them back to life even if he wanted to, not with their souls residing inside the entities which ate them. Though her cousin was huge and represented a massive amount of resources and equipment, nanite foundries could make another vessel of her size within a month and a half. Hardware was unimportant to the Legion Master when it came down to choosing life over property. They were not going to the other ship for the hardware. They were going to save what people they could, or to take revenge if none were left alive. "Fine," Marana said in irritation. "Once you turn on the backup power, I'll make me a body over there and join you." Lucifer flashed her a wolfish grin as some of the last Legionnaires were boarding their gunships. "I've got extra seats in the paper-thin tin can we're taking. You're more than welcome to tag along if you are up for some excitement." A shudder passed through the metal woman because, despite being a living warship, she had a fear of flying, which carried over from when she was flesh and blood. She gestured with her hands in a shooing motion. "Go on ahead. I still have to keep Delia from destroying your room. She has not been a happy camper since finding out I won't open the door and let her risk her life in this suicidal and fun team-building exercise." Lucifer grimaced. He was looking more forward to facing ravenous demons than trying to explain to Delia Montsenior why she could not come with him on this ill-fated trip. Her customary place for almost 500,000 years was by his side. "Yeah, about that. Sorry," Lucifer replied, looking back to the opening into the ship they had just come from. "You should probably let her out after I'm gone. She keeps her last carbine by the headboard. Knowing her, she will no doubt try to burn through the door when she feels like enough is enough." "I know," Marana replied irritably. She had already activated the quarter's fire suppression systems and did not wish to be the one to tell him about his ruined possessions. "So, hurry the hell up already." The old creator flashed her a wink and bounded aboard his gunship. Doors slammed closed before the gremlins hurtled into the void past the hangar's electrostatic barriers. Lucifer looked around the amber-lit crew compartment of the gunship. 9 armored helmets looked back at him. The 10th was still retracted into its neck seal and belonged to the Century's Centurion, the Angel Aemon. Aemon was ancient among his kind, and even other creators went out of their way to give him hard-earned respect, because when dealing with the truly eternal, age is almost everything. The fact he was dangerous enough to be the commander of the Legion Master's bodyguard didn't hurt his reputation either. The Centurion's face was covered in old scars. He could have easily repaired the damage, yet chose to keep visible mementos to remind him of the events which found him in his current position. Aemon's armor had at one point been painted in the colors of the Legion. Now, he barely had any color left to it, besides bare metal, except in hard-to-reach creases. Most Legionnaires chose to keep their gear in such a state to show off their length of service in the form of crude one-upmanship. Each Legionnaire wore the embossed sigil of their respective legio on their breastplate, and since Century Zero existed without a larger organization, the Centurion was allowed to pick a device of his own choosing. The sigil the Angel had chosen was an odd one. It consisted of 2 plain cylinders leaning over to touch at the top. On the newest members of the Century, it would have been painted pitch black. The sigil was an inside joke to those old enough to remember the story. Once, an artillery shell landed on the Century's signifier, which had destroyed both the signifier and the standard he had been carrying. Aemon had somehow managed to retrieve a pair of black underwear one of his men had carried with him as a good luck charm, and tied it to the broken haft of a piece of pipe they had found. There was a nearby half-full contubernium of mortal soldiers, and the Angel had forced their small group to carry the improvised banner and follow. Supposedly, this was also the story of how 5 members of the traditionally all-angelic group came to be mortals. Lucifer saw his Centurion staring at him with a goofy grin on his face and asked, "Something funny, Aemon?" The Angel shrugged his armored shoulders and said, "Oh, it's nothing really." I was just wondering how many of your antique books will be left between the princess's laser fire and our fearless leaders putting out of those fires. I have more than just books in my room, Lucifer replied, keeping his voice steady to not show his concern about his belongings. Uh-huh, sure, Amon chuckled. His dull green eyes were sparkling with mirth. You're like a dragon, boss. If you see a poor, defenseless, and ownerless book, you are overpowered by a burning desire to add it to your collection. A small smile tugged at one corner of the Creator's mouth. All immortal beings had vices and addictions, as they were the only way they could remain halfway sane through the maddening eternity of their existence. Amon was right. Delia had no doubt murdered his collection in her rage at being left behind. To the Legion Master, it meant he could begin building a new collection if such a thing proved to be true. Many of the things in his cabin were priceless, one-of-a-kind pieces. Despite her frustration, the woman trapped in the room would have taken care to secure those items to where they would not have been damaged. She was not a monster after all, just making her displeasure known. The woman the Centaurian referred to was Princess Delia Mont Senior, formerly of the Akaru state. The Akaru were a race which doomed themselves by their own hands in a fit of industrial revolution. A little over 233,000 of their years ago, which was close to double the normal standard, an Akaru queen by the name of Claude Avenisis gave the orders which doomed her people. Claude had a spiritual revelation during one of her many drug-induced fever dreams. She claimed their goddess had ordered her to take her people and go forth in righteous conquest of their neighbors. The Akaru people did not care one way or the other, but a person does not disobey an absolute monarchy and live long. The people did as their queen commanded, having the unfortunate task of digging ever deeper into their less dense than normal terrestrial world for heavy metals to spawn the second industrial revolution, which irrevocably polluted the world of Akaru. The sunlight stopped shining on the planet's surface from the toxic smog which now perpetually covered every inch of the planet. All of the plants had died, except for those sealed away in greenhouses. Following the plants, the animals vanished as well. The Akaru people were reduced to 1/10 of their number through famine and starvation before the young creator Lamashtu broke one of the cardinal rules for her kind, granting immortality to a mortal race. While she did save the Akaru people from extinction, the price of their immunities to toxins, disease, and starvation was unspeakable. Lamashtu had forced her chosen race to consume the souls of other sentients to remain alive. Interestingly enough, just as true beings of spirit were forced to do to, though an angel had mortals pray to them to open a mental connection to siphon a minuscule portion of their soul, while an Akaru took all of a soul at once, killing the host. Leaving Amon to tend to his men in the troop compartment, Lucifer moved to stand in the limited confines of the gunship's cockpit. 2 angels sat at the craft's controls using their hands instead of mental interfaces to control the small void craft. Though mental connections provided faster response times, the 2 had proven their skills more time than anyone could count, and the Legion Master always allowed his people to work in the manner they found to be most productive. Looking on the hollow screens in front of him, Lucifer could see the rapidly approaching white disk, which was the mobile shipyard Grendeline. She was a saucer-shaped vessel, which measured some 50 miles in diameter. Single-handedly, the shipyard could repair and refit multiple Legios during the course of a normal campaign. Now she sat motionless and lifeless in a rapidly expanding cloud of vented debris and crew members, a sad reminder to all beings of their own mortality. The co-pilot's hands danced over haptic holograms as he made use of the gunship's sensors and Morana's probes to find an open hangar bay, which was close to the derelict ship's computer core. Any distance was a considerable hurdle to cover while fending off attacks from being which longed for nothing more than to eat you. Finding his target, the co-pilot stabbed at a floating icon which saw a highlighted route appear through the debris field. Grabbing the image, he then tossed it to his partner, who saw all unnecessary icons melt away except for the portion of the debris field around his new route. Expert hands saw the small craft lead its trailing brethren through the twisting field of metal and corpses to land in a small auxiliary hangar meant to service tugs. Eamon secured his helmet and opened the gunship's doors after venting the internal atmosphere. Lucifer, being a creator, was unaffected by the wild temperature swings of the void, and other such trivial matters as a lack of oxygen and freezing temperature. Though they did not need to breathe for respirational purposes, a creator required an atmosphere to produce sound waves for speaking. Lucifer activated his own armor in the interest of communicating with his men. An effort of will saw an impossibly thin layer of liquid metal flow from a pendant which hung from his neck under his clothes to cover his skin. The armor was not entirely comprised of nanites. Rather, it was room temperature and pressure liquid metal hydrogen, which was capable of movement without the mass-produced amoebas found in the standard armor. No organic life could move fast enough to keep up with a being who could bend and break the very laws of reality. The armor was a holdover of the time when technology was not actively limited to keep wars from destroying whole universes as they had in the past. Such armor was used by all Legion members when in the frontier, fighting peoples who had not agreed to the limiting treaties. The armor housed a full suite of sensors and communications gear, as well as offering full tactile feedback to its wearer. Were the wearer mortal or even angelic, the armor would amplify the wearer's strength when called upon to do so. Mind activating the correct channel caused an explosion of sound in Lucifer's helmet. With a grimace, he turned the volume down to bearable levels and looked around the hangar as the gunships were returning to the void to examine the hull of the great shipyard for latched-on pirates and to catalogue the damage for Marana. Plus, it was always the best practice to keep your ride from being a stationary target. Small tugs and powered repair suits had remained mag-locked to the airless hangar's deck plating when Gwendoline vented herself to stop the demons from gaining access to her core. At least, such was Lucifer and Morana's hope. Side panels had been opened on a few of the tugs, and Eamon was looking at the handiwork of former naval engineers from before the mystery calamity. "It's funny, you know," the Centurion said over the quantum net to Lucifer on a private channel. "Give mortals the most advanced tech in creation, and professionals will always prefer to use their hands." Lucifer grunted in acknowledgement and replied, "Tinkerer's got a tinker. Kind of reminds me of our Overlord's room. She can think at light speed while commanding more machines than you can count, but she still uses her hands on her workbench too." Marana could not help but set the hook Lucifer had left out for her. She was infinitely nosy and loved to listen in on private conversations, along with watching everything she could. Her voice intruded on the pair's conversation. "Oh wow, that's so funny, coming from people who will soon have to walk several thousand miles to get back home. It's cool. Most of us are immortal and can wait the several hundred years or so. It should take you to float your way back. I might even space your junk to make room for more of my stuff, if you keep complaining about my habits. Let's see now. In inventory, you both have—" "We will behave," Lucifer grumbled, giving the woman her win. A small grape-sized drone floated into the hangar to bob in front of Lucifer's face, threateningly. Even though the sentient could see through any one of the Legionnaires' combat cameras and sensors mounted in their armor, she felt the need to have some form of physical representation. Lucifer smiled behind his opaque visor and held his hands up in a gesture of surrender. The camera drone bobbed down as Morana took her victory curtsy. No applause came from the century of immortal killing machines as the female angel, Malik, Century Zero's Optio, or second-in-command, issued orders to move out. The Optio had caused a highlighted cyan navigational line to appear on the Century's heads-up display. Needing no further guidance, the angels raced down abandoned hallways with mag-locked boots to follow their commanding officer. A gesture meant in no way to hurry along the notoriously sloth-like Legion Master. Only Lucifer and Amon remained in the hangar bay alongside Morana's camera drone. The Legion Master shook his armored head and spoke as he started walking after his angels with his frustrating, lethargic pace. You would think by now they would let the Creator take the bullets first. No, Amon replied. I prefer it this way. Means less work for me in the long run since I stand right next to you. Although, on a serious note, Overlord, have we any idea of how many demons are inside of your cousin? None, Morana replied, bobbing her drone side to side in an altogether organic manner. We know Gwendoline reported them flooding her corridors, and we know there was enough to butcher over 120,000 sailors. Or it could have just been one who got extremely lucky and managed to do away with the few angels on board first. Morana was not insensitive to the wanton murder which had previously occurred. Witnessing such atrocities, or for that matter committing them, was something the three old beings had seen and done many times before. They had become calloused and jaded towards death and its many forms. Amon sighed as he knelt to run one of his gauntleted fingers down a dark brown smear on the deck plating. It's going to be a long day today, isn't it? Yes, both Lucifer and Morana said in unison as the trio continued moving down the corridors of the once lively ship. It did not take long before signs of firefights began to make their appearance. In a trait common to almost every sailor in the known universes, direct energy weapons were the preferred weapons of choice for use inside of any ship, whether it traveled on liquid or through the void. Lasers and masers ran a much lower risk of punching through a ship's hull and venting whatever atmosphere was held inside. Scorch marks were soon visible, which reminded Lucifer of a mortal child's first attempts to use a writing implement. Like a child swinging his marker wildly across their parents' pristine white walls, the partially scored and slagged scars of laser fire were painted in long, sweeping arcs. Unfortunately, many of Gwendoline's dead crew members showed signs of dismemberment from friendly fire, as they lay side by side the sliced figures of demons. Demons were bipedal in nature, as were their angelic counterparts, thanks to form following function, regardless of what universe a being resides in. Almost all beings of spirit were half again to twice the size of the average mortal, but where the demons differed were their clawed, 10-fingered hands and distorted vessels. Not many were altogether sure as to why, but the majority of demonic bodies were of a twisted and wrong nature, as if to mimic their insanity. Those who knew remained silent on the matter for their own personal reasons. The trio carefully did their best to step around the corpses, littering their path as they made their way to a small auxiliary control room. Their detour was not one of want, but rather a necessity. The only heat source which was still active from the once great ship was coming from the main zero-point siphon. Emergency systems were put in place on all Legion vessels to prevent the main siphon compartments from being vented or powered down, the only exception being pure physical damage. This was to aid repair crews in restarting a derelict ship, as zero-point siphons were notoriously temperature-sensitive. This being the case, Since angels and demons required an atmosphere to breathe, there would only be one place for a being of spirit to hide inside of the airless and cold vessel. Main power was also required to reactivate Grendeline's complex network of databanks in the core, another safety precaution in the event a Legion vessel was captured. To do anything, the demons had to be let out. What felt like hours passed as Lucifer carefully picked his way through his dead people until at last he came to a great dark hole. The closest auxiliary power transfer station to the core was normally protected by a several-foot-thick armored blast door. Yet, in its place, there was a ragged maw. Claw marks crisscrossed the metal wall around the space where a door used to be, and there was an ocean of freeze-dried blood spilling from the wound in a grisly brownish-red river. Silently, Lucifer shook his head and went inside, his weight cracking the dried pools of blood. The inside of the room looked to be straight from a nightmare, thanks to the spiderwebs of intestines which had been strung up across anchor points. The screaming visages of the legionnaires littering the room stared at the newcomer trio as if they knew their darkest secrets. Blood had coated every surface to include the lights, which now gave off a ghastly brownish-red aura. Something had delighted in the slaughter wrought in the room, and had taken the time to tastelessly arrange the room to highlight its work as if signing a signature. Looking around, Lucifer moved to a side wall, where there was a panel missing to expose a mass of heavy-duty fiber-optic cables. The charred hands, which used to belong to a Legion sailor, were grasping a pair of large-mouthed bolt cutters, which were now fused with one of the cut wires to hang limply down. Without hesitation, the Legion Master reached out his hands to remove the cutters with a wrenching motion and grab onto the two cut ends of the power cable. Thousands of amps coursed across the surface of his armor as he brought the two wire ends together. He transferred the sparking knot to one hand and ripped a part of the cover's hatch off to make a band to hold the cables together. The room's consoles, mounted on waist-high platforms, came back online with a begrudging flicker of rust-colored light. "That connection is going to burn out soon," Morana said, over the private channel, as her metallic avatar extruded itself from one of the gore-caked walls. "Get out of the way." Centurion Orman was banging a gauntlet on the surface of the room's central holoconsoles to break off sharks of bloody ice, which spun lazily away in the zero-G vacuum. Morana was moving quickly because she did not know how long it would take to burn out the connection. Well, she had already run the math from what she could see, and the answer was not long. She pushed Ammon to the side so she could have access to the console's data port. Her right pointer finger flowed like water to take on the shape of a standard data crystal. She plugged it into one of the open ports on the console and took control of what systems she could with minimal power. As she did, she murmured, "Running damage diagnostics and rerouting power from other backups." The band holding the cables melted, and the two cut ends of the fiber-optic power cables untwisted. As the room was plunged into the rust-colored amber gloom of the emergency lights, neither of the men said anything as they trusted the woman implicitly. Slowly the main lights switched on, and the consoles began to flicker back to life before going through their boot-up sequences. Holo terminals flared into brilliant life as Morana brought her cousin systems back online one by one. The majority of the holographic images which appeared were almost too fast for a mortal's eye to follow, as the sentient examined the recorded logs up until Grendeline's last act of defiance to her enemy. Morana's voice soon filled the grim silence as she said, "Closing all open external doors, and I'm raising electrostatic barriers in the places still open to the void so we can bring life support back online. Figure it to be about 3 hours before this place thaws enough to where the demons can move around freely. And, Not to say I told you boys so, but I stopped counting heat signatures in the siphon core at over 700. Sensors show a damaged non-Legion ship in Hangar 2E, lots of blood around it. I checked for people in suits. We have a couple dozen hidden away. I'm sending SAR teams to get them and linking them to the Centuries comms in case they are closer. The Legion Master interrupted. Please tell me some of our people outside the ship are alive. Morana nodded her head. Some, yes. How many? Eamon asked. 57. She, of course, knew about the ones outside of the ship when she had arrived. Her search and rescue pilots had been collecting them as soon as was possible. The Centurion smashed his fist into one of the consoles. What the hell happened here? There should be way more survivors. I keep telling you, boss, your stupid treaties keep getting people killed. He meant, of course, the limiting treaties. Eamon knew why so few of Grendeline's crew did not make it, and it was an argument he brought up a lot because he was a professional soldier concerned with winning at all costs. The Legion pendants every Legionnaire wore as their comms unit all had the ability to change into the liquid metal armor. But here in the areas as defined by the treaties, they were turned off because soldiers were soldiers, regardless of where they came from. If they had a superior weapon, they would use it. Other soldiers in creator-run nations would do likewise, and the escalation would continue until wars were obliterating solar systems, as a matter of course. The treaties were there for a reason, to stop the inevitable. Come on, the Legion Master said, feeling the same emotions as his Centurion. We still have work to do. Morana fiddled with the console on her end for a few seconds more, then unplugged her finger to follow before asking, Do you want the details of that ship in 2E? Not unless it poses a direct threat, Eamon said, moving to the ragged hole where the blast door used to be. We can look into that after we finish what we came here for. You know, I am not opposed to spending the time for the siphon to come back online after a deep freeze. His meaning was obvious. If they needed to save Grendelin, all they needed to do was remove her databanks and rebuild her somewhere else. They did not need an atmosphere, and the survivors were in environmental suits. There was a possibility they could rid the ship of its overwhelming demonic presence without firing a shot, without risking more lives. The Legion Master gently pushed away a floating corpse which had spilled its intestine from a nasty abdominal wound which looked like many claws. It would take a minimum of 3 days to bring the siphon back online if there was no other damage to core components. We still do not know how this happened to Grendelin in the first place. Do you want this to happen to someone else, because we were taking our time playing it safe here? As a reactivated air duct began blowing frigid air, one of the strung-up corpses slipped its mooring and fell to hang where they could all see. The man's face was twisted in abject panic, and the remaining arm on the torso was reaching out as if pleading for help. No, the angel replied, as anger boiled his blood. He may not have known who these people were, but they were his people. There should be a reckoning for what was done, even though he knew they were probably going to lose people. He also knew the members of Century Zero would not care about the odds, because they would all be feeling the same way. The hours drug by as the trio made their way towards the rest of Century Zero, who were guarding the ship's core and rescuing those survivors who were close. Morana had not reactivated her cousin's artificial gravity, as its activation would have made movement problematic, as millions of small body parts and their liquids would fall to the deck. Both the Sentient and the Legion Master were not willing to step on the bodies of their fallen brethren unless absolutely necessary. Advanced scouts were soon found in full optical camo as they ranged out to provide advanced warning of what everyone knew would inevitably be coming. Eamon broke off to return to his men, leaving Lucifer and Morana alone to stare down a long, starkly lit corridor. The corridor would run some 100 feet before terminating at a many thousand-ton armored door, which was the entrance to Grendeline's computer core. Lucifer noted, as he advanced down the corridor, that there were no dead soldiers or sailors in this hall. The sentient had vented herself before the demons had made it this far in their slaughter. His hands clenched into fists as he thought of how many sailors had been spaced needlessly. There was a remote possibility they could have taken shelter in the core itself. However, Grendeline had many universes worth of experience at her job, the same as Morana. He trusted her to have made the right call, given she was in the situation at the time, and he was not. When the pair arrived in front of the smooth blast door, Morana reached out a hand to rap one of her knuckles against the metal alloy. "Would you mind doing the honors?" she said, pointing to the edges. She used defensive lasers to slag the edge and weld it in place. Lucifer raised one arm to do the heavy lifting. He rested his palm against the smooth, featureless surface of the impossibly heavy door before closing it. His fingers bit deep into the armor plating, and with an effortless motion, he ripped the 1,000-ton door from its housing to toss it behind him. Morana was the first to enter the room, and the Legion Master looked behind him at the empty corridor and shook his head. "The demons never made it this far into the ship," he stated. "What do you want me to do? Sit there and cry and wring my hands?" "We have both seen worse, and we will continue to see worse because your creation was designed this way." Morana paused in place and closed her eyes to rub them with her right hand. "I'm sorry. I should not have said that. You did not say anything that was not true." "Still," the metal woman argued, "that was cruel of me. We would not be here for the good or the bad if it were not for you. Let's forget it. We need to stay focused. What in the hell was she doing out here without backup? My cousin knows better than to do stupid stuff like this. She never told me she was coming out here, and there is no reason for someone like her to even consider displacing so far from the rest of us on her own. She is not a warship." Despite the power being back on, Grendeline's room was still dark. It was lit only by the faintest of red emergency light, which was now beginning to brighten and return to normal white after being adjusted by Morana. All around the room were scattered the various belongings of the sentient who owned it. Morana littered her own room with strange and odd technologies which she had collected from her extensive travels. In her free time, she would dissect and rebuild them, along with modifying any weapons she found to personal standards. Grendeline, however, chose to fill her room with vast amounts of written material, an act which the Legion Master highly approved of. Despite being able to perceive digital information at the speed of light, it was unclear whether this collection was a holdover from the woman's past, or if just her hobby. Also scattered about the room were the belongings of another. The garb and trophies of a Legion legatus were arranged on orderly shelves, besides various personal effects and weapons. On one side of the room was a large bed, upon which the form of a woman lay curled into a ball, while clutching an unadorned purple Legion jacket to her breast. There were no adornments on the jacket, and it had the crumpled look of something the sentients liked to wear casually. Grendeline had chosen a more flesh and blood appearance for her avatar, rather than the cold utilitarian one of Morana. The Legion Master and his sentients shared a knowing look as Morana moved to reactivate her sister core. Her slender hand paused over a terminal which jutted from a towering databank. She paused as if reading information from the many hollow screens around the databank she was at. "You do know she chose to turn herself off, right?" Lucifer nodded, staring at the jacket as he now understood why she vented the atmosphere and went dark. "Yes, and we both know why she did." Relations between subordinates and their superiors had never been outlawed in the Legion. Too many of the superiors would be immortal, with the same needs and desires of their mortal troops. Legionnaires were often forced to spend long stretches of time away from home, and in the case of the angels, most knew nothing of the concept of home outside of the ones they made on whatever world or ship they were on. The Legion Master would not pass judgment upon the shipyard sentients, for he was the last being to be immune from the feelings of loneliness. Grimly, Morana touched the console and brought her cousin back to life. Almost immediately, the fleshy avatar of Gwendolen began to weep and clutch ever tighter at her lover's possessions. Her internal and external sensors would tell her what happened since her suicide, and who was standing before her. "Leave me alone," she hissed quietly from her position on the bed. "Can't you see I want to die?" Pain showed on the Creator's face at his subordinate's next words. "They're all dead. The monsters tore them apart while I tried to stop them. They killed him first, my Justinian, before they paraded what remained of his body with them, as they butchered my crew. We didn't have any angels. Why didn't we have some angels to stop this?" Morana looked to Lucifer. Her unique position among her people meant she had angels to spare. She closed her eyes and looked away, as if ashamed. "Gwendolen?" Lucifer asked, in as calm a voice as he could muster, given the circumstances. "How did demons get inside your hull in the middle of one of the largest stellar voids in this verse?" "My legate," the weeping sentient replied. "We responded to a distress call from a freighter of the Pelimort Consortium." Lucifer turned his head slightly to the side, like an animal hearing a strange sound. "There is no host-controlled displacement gate within millions of light-years of our position. How did pirates get this far unmolested? The Pelimort Consortium was a relatively new up-and-coming group. Bands of pirates had discovered, if they worked together, they could make exponentially more money than they could alone. Another perk of cooperation was a larger and more organized navy. This navy could be used to successfully fend off the small fleets dispatched to teach the pirates the error of stealing ships and plundering colonies. 263 years earlier, the consortium was taught a lesson brought on by their abduction of a Legion merchantman. An entire world and one of their fleets were obliterated, the act thoughtfully broadcast on every known communications channel in the region. Ever since then, the Pelimort Consortium did everything it could to stay far away from anything Legion. Gwendolen's avatar squeezed her eyes shut as the Legion Master's words forced her to remember. They came out of the frigate. The ship was drifting and venting atmosphere after some kind of explosion from inside. I took them into one of my holds to save their lives. Justinian. He was the first one slain when the demons came out. "Why was he the first one there?" Lucifer asked, even though he suspected the answer. "We've had dealings with its captain before." Lucifer raised his hand and pinched the bridge of his nose as he closed his eyes. At the faint edge of his greater-than-mortal hearing, wild screams could be heard, along with a thunderous roar of thousands of footfalls, along with the staccato chatter of the scouts' hypervelocity railguns. "I still need you," he said. "Once we take care of this infestation, we will find you another crew." Gwendolen's eyes went wide as she jumped off the bed, still clutching Legate Justinian's jacket. She ran across the deck to thrust the wrinkled uniform into the ancient being's face. "No!" she screamed, in a voice great enough to rupture a mortal's eardrums. Sympathetic shudders could be felt through the deck as the great ship reacted to its master's anger. "I can't do this again! Just let me die!" Sections of the ceiling slid back and away as defense lasers' domes slid down. Morana glanced around and froze very still. Laser fire would not kill her, but it would be a sore inconvenience. She did ready herself to come to Lucifer's aid. Grendlin may have been her biological cousin once upon a time, yet the Legion Master gave her salvation after dooming her people with her own hands. Some bonds went beyond blood. The Creator grabbed the Avatar by the sides of her head and forced Grendlin to look into his eyes. Servos could be heard humming as they brought the focusing lenses of the laser to bear, though they did not fire. They could not, as the sentient's mind was invaded, to where she could do nothing other than stare into the eternity of the Legion Master's eyes. A piercing silver light stabbed into the dim light from that eternity, as he allowed a portion of himself to become manifest into this universe. "You swore an oath to me, Grendlin," he growled. "You swore an oath to my Legion. More importantly, you swore an oath to your crew, and to Legate Justinian, to bring them home safe by every power you had. You failed them. We both owe it to them to do better, and make sure this never happens to anyone ever again." To Lucifer's surprise, the crying sentient was able to raise her hands and drive sledgehammer blows into his arms. She should have been helpless in his grasp, yet her rage and pain allowed her some limited movement and apparently speech as she yelled obscenities at him. Lucifer grimaced, ultimately deciding on a course of action he hated to do. He forced her to relive the painful proceedings in her mind. Over and over again, the sentient relived the recent nightmare until she was a quaking mess, because facing trauma was the only way to get over it. Once her rage had dissipated and turned to sorrow, Lucifer spoke to her softly. "I can't bring them back to life, Grendlin. If it was any other force besides these degenerate monsters, maybe I could. I would bring them all back if it was within my power, especially your legate. I would bring everyone back who have been forced to give their lives for our cause. But I can't. You are immortal. We are immortal. We must bear a pain of loss which no ordinary person could ever hope to comprehend. And no matter how difficult it may be for us, use those experiences to guide the younger generations." He let go of her and stepped back to walk towards the ruined door leading to the corridor, back towards the now closer sounds of railgun fire and demonic screaming. "How?" Grendlin asked in a weak voice. "How do you deal with this?" The question was not unexpected. This was the first time she had ever lost her whole crew before. She had seen such wholesale slaughter before, from a distance, of course, however. This was the first time it had happened inside her own hull, given she had always been behind friendly lines, and had plenty of opportunities to displace away if the fighting got close to her. Or perhaps she had always been lucky up until today. Lucifer paused as horrible memories flooded his mind. His voice sounded far away as he answered, "Billions of my people die every month in just this verse alone. Billions are dying now, just as when I first founded the Legion. How do I cope with it, you ask?" A grim smile lifted the Legion Master's lips. "There will no doubt come a day where both of you will be gone. Nothing more than a cherished memory as I still continue to exist. I continue because I have no other choice. I continue because you people need me. All I know is there will come a day where I find the bastard who made me this way and pay him back for every single life my Legion has lost in defense of the living. At least, that is what I tell myself to lessen the pain. How frightening a thing would it be to find out I was the byproduct of random chance. I don't know anymore. I just put one foot in front of the other and keep going. It's all I can do for you unless I am willing to turn into a monster." Morana brushed past her cousin to stand next to Lucifer. She had grasped his hand in a measure of solidarity against the death all around. The shipyard sentence slipped her arms through the jacket of her dead Justinian, moving to stand with the Legion Master and her cousin. The howling screams of the demons were getting closer. "Activating internal defenses," Gwendoline said, clenching her fists and setting her jaw. "I want to be transferred to a warship after we finish this. Are you sure that is a good idea?" "Yes, old man," the sentient growled. "I will not take this and go sit in the corner." "This is not happening again." The Legion Master closed his eyes as the cloth-tearing sound of several heavy railguns began to open up on the only other living things in the derelict ship. "Fine," he agreed. "But I am still trying to save some of our people who went feral when Ahura Mazda went insane and left us. I have a list of demons I will not allow you to kill unless they prove beyond saving. Can you agree to those terms?" Gwendoline looked to her cousin in shock, who grimly nodded in return, confirming the ancient being's words. Gwendoline had unfettered access to every Legion database via quantum connection, and she could not find anything about plans to save any of the former Legion angels who followed the insane creator after her madness. This task was being carried out in secret, as everyone knew demons existed only to kill and consume. They were the enemy of all sentient life. The Legion Master, hiding behind the disgraced angel Lucifer's name, said, "I am not my children, Gwendoline. I believe everyone deserves the chance to atone for their sins. I have people working on giving some of them that chance, and so you would be directly involved. If you can agree to leave some of them alone for now, you are free to do with the rest as you wish. I will put you in touch with the one leading the operation, but I warn you, that individual has absolute authority in her mission. You will agree to my terms and her decisions. No exceptions." Since the sentient thought at light speed, it did not take her but a moment to run through every conversation she could think of in her head. She wanted to hurt those who hurt her. All that was being asked was that she leave a few of them alone. The choice was a simple one. "I agree," she said,